Greetings and welcome back to Room 303 AP English and our Roberts text. We are now with Thomas Gray's Sonnet on the Death of Richard West, an offering from both 1742 and 1775. This is an interesting text for a number of reasons. We'll get into it. Thomas Gray, of course, we're familiar with our work on LearnStrong.net. Of course, we have Elegy written in a country churchyard, for the poem for which he's most remembered. Gray's dates again 1716 to 1771. Although born before or dies before 1800, that date that we kind of assign to the beginning of British Romanticism, the reality is that in some ways Gray might have been easily understood, and I think today often is understood as a precursor to the Romantic movement. That'll be interesting because of Wordsworth's lyrical ballads. We'll get into it in a moment. In his lifetime, Gray only published 13 poems. He was very reluctant to make his stuff public, and in some ways he becomes somewhat infamous because of the treatment that is assigned to him, and especially this poem in Wordsworth's lyrical ballads. Now, of course, we've given lectures on lyrical ballads in our World of Ideas lecture at LearnStrong.net. You can run that one down. Of course, we've talked a little bit about the importance of lyrical ballads. What I haven't said about lyrical ballads is that in one point in the essay, Wordsworth uses this poem to talk about what's wrong with the older kind of poetry, especially because the diction is somewhat elevated in the light. Now, Richard West was a pal of Gray's, and so upon his death, he wrote a poem about him. Not unusual, and we're going to see this with a number of our Romantic poets as well. Let's just read the poem now and enjoy what's going on. Again, it is a sonnet, a 14-line offering of iambic pentameter, notice, rhyme scheme, and all of that. In vain to me the smiling mornings shine, and reddening Phoebus lifts his golden fire. The birds in vain their amorous descant join, or cheerful fields resume their green attire. These ears, alas, for other notes repine, a different object do these eyes require. My lonely anguish melts no heart but mine, and in my breast the imperfect joys expire. Yet morning smiles the busy race to cheer, and newborn pleasure brings to happier men. The fields to all their wonted tribute bear, to warm their little loves the birds complain. I, fruitless, mourn to him that cannot hear, and weep the more, because I weep in vain. Now, reminding us very much of Milton's Thucydides as well as Tennyson's In Memoriam, both texts we've lectured at LearnStrong.net. We have, of course, a tribute poem here caused by the death of a dear loved friend. Of course, notice at 2a the messages here of anguish, of sorrow, the idea that everything else in nature seems to be alive and singing and vibrant, but not me. The anguish at line 7, right? And then notice the turn at 2b, the diction, of course, and then the turn at line 9 with yet morning smiles. That is to say, maybe there is some hope, although at the end of the poem still it's clear that the weeping is in vain. We're not going to bring Richard West back, are we? At 3a, we've mentioned already Tennyson's In Memoriam and Milton's Thucydides. Those two poems are great tribute poems of a passing or a lost individual. Keats would write one of these kinds of sonnets as well. Finally, at 3b, what was a time when you could totally appreciate this? That is to say, you could relate in some way to what was happening in your life, and yet you were so sad. You were maybe even depressed. What was a time when that happened? What was a time when you lost a pal? Maybe not to death, but you lost a friend, you lost a pal. Maybe you had to move away to try and get some sense of this one. Finally, on page 690, question 4 asks about Wordsworth's view regarding this sonnet. Wordsworth says, quote, "It will easily be perceived that the only part of this sonnet which is of any value is the lines printed in italics. It is equally obvious that the language of these lines does in no respect differ from that of prose. Now, again, 3B, what are your thoughts on that? Do you make distinctions in, you know, in this regards? And to what degree do you think that Wordsworth is justified? Well, there you go, Thomas Gray and his sonnet for a pal. Thank you.